My name is Jamila Lodge. I am the Communication and Development Director for Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, and that is in Bermuda. And we are the primary resource that supports small and medium enterprises in Bermuda. So we provide loan guarantee support, microloans, educational support, incubators, accelerators. So pretty much anything to do with entrepreneurship you can find at our corporation. So I'm really excited to be speaking with some fabulous people today. I am going to introduce them and read their bios, and then I'll let them give you a little bit more information about what they do. So I'm going to start at the far end. So I have Shirley Ann Baravesh. Oh, great. And Shirley Ann is an assistant professor in global sustainable enterprise with the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Baravesh is also a senior sustainability scientist with the Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation. She holds degrees in management, finance, manufacturing, engineering, and sustainability. Her research focuses on strategies to encourage adoption of sustainability and innovation practices within organizations and communities. And having grown up on a small island in the Caribbean, St. Lucia, she is particularly interested in building resilient communities through grassroots innovations in small island states and the developing world. She teaches courses in innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability, and she works with and advises organizations in the field of sustainability. So welcome her. Next up is my colleague and countrymate, Ray Jones. He is a CPA with over 30 years of experience in financial management and economic development. He's the current director of the Economic Development Department for the Bermuda government. Ray spearheads strategic planning and leads a team of focused on fostering business growth and economic prosperity for Bermuda. Ray's experience includes serving as CEO of a security services company, managing his own financial consulting firm, and holding senior financial positions at BEDC and the Bank of Bermuda. So, welcome him. And last, but certainly not least, our superstar of the conference, Osleen Carrington, as CEO of the Guyana Economic Development Trust in the USA and the Economic Development Fund in Guyana. She possesses over 25 years of experience that includes supporting the growth of small and medium enterprises through private sector and U.S. government agencies, serving in senior management positions at U.S. Fortune 500 corporations, leading nonprofit and educational organizations, and launching startups in and outside of large organizations. Her functional responsibilities have included strategic planning, organizational development, business development, fundraising, operations management, marketing, and corporate finance. Osleen's experience also includes serving as a venture capital fellow on the MIT alumni team for Alumni Ventures Group, an active venture firm. So I think you can agree that we have the right people on the panel. So let's get into it. First up, I just would like each of you to just share with us what you do for your organizations and how you support SMEs. So Osleen, we'll start with you.
Sure. First of all, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jamila, for inviting me, and thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. The Economic Development Fund, which is what I'll focus on in Guyana, is an incubator for ag tech and ag science and general technology startups, as well as an accelerator for agro-processors scaling to export to the U.S. and beyond, and also the region. We have also launched recently an investment firm called Investment Firm, in that it's a corporation. Its specific focus is investment. The Impact Venture Fund in Guyana, and we are expanding regionally as a result of some additional funding from our current sources of funding, which are multilaterals, government, corporations, and so forth. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Ray?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and Jamila, and everyone, thank you for having me. First, I want to acknowledge the Chairman and Member of Parliament, José Adams here. Thank you for joining us, sir. In my current role as the Director of the Economic Development Department, our primary focus is to help attract foreign direct investment into the jurisdiction. but also for it to filter right down through to grassroots. So it isn't just to encourage large corporations to come and set up and maybe employ people, but also pass on some of that knowledge and capital down to grassroots, small and medium size, and potentially, hopefully, those businesses can benefit and grow and become globally. We have three main units. One is a concierge, so basically, once we get a potential corporation on the hook, they will come into the concierge and we'll help them navigate through all the government red tape and application forms. As you can imagine, well, if we ever had a government experience, just trying to figure out which application form to fill out can be quite a problem. So we eliminate that. You come through to us, and we basically walk you through the process. Then we have a business development unit that basically, when we do attract clients, we try to connect them business to business or business to agencies so the jurisdiction can benefit from. And our third stream is our legal and regulatory team, and their main job is to look at helping to facilitate new legislation or amend old outdated legislation, and they do that through stakeholder consultation. So that's the EDD.
Perfect. Thank you. Shirley Ann?
It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. Thank you for making the time this afternoon to be here. I know it's the last session, and I'm sure lots of you are tired. There's not much to add to what was said. So I'm from the tiny island of St. Lucia. I currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'm at Arizona State. And wait, are you from St. Lucia?
He's right.
Okay. So I'm a professor there in sustainable enterprise, as you heard. And though my current role is all about research, so I do a lot of research in entrepreneurship and sustainability, I've tried to reach out to businesses in St. Lucia because I realized one of the ways in which we uplift ourselves is to come up with a problem solve. And we see this in all of our small communities, right? We problem solve all the time. We come up with these innovations that we don't consider as innovations, and so they don't get considered as entrepreneurial opportunities. So I started by working with some small businesses or people with ideas, and then I realized, and this is something we were talking about earlier, that there was this inherent obstacle to get through. So people were not able to push their entrepreneurial initiatives because of whatever obstacles there were. And I realized that there was something there that really needed to be brought out or researched. So my research has taken this turn, and I've started looking at the obstacles, right, to those entrepreneurial ventures and initiatives. So even that, just that point of, can I do this? You know, examining what is that fear? Where does that come from? And the societal norms that basically take or lead us to not act. So that's where a lot of my research has been, and so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But very excited to be here with you all.
So I have all these questions, right? I wrote all these questions that I said I was going to ask, and I have a feeling that I'm just going to discard these, and we're just going to have a conversation. So I just want to piggyback off of what you said, Shirley Ann, because when I thought about this panel, I was saying, you know, the Caribbean, yes, we are small, but we're mighty. Right? And so I wanted us to be able to highlight some of those things that makes us different from every other jurisdiction. What are the things that we sell to try to get businesses to come to our respective islands, or that we tell our entrepreneurs that we support to say to others to differentiate themselves? So I will start with you, Asleen, and just ask, and each of you can answer. So what are the things that are uniquely different about being in the Caribbean, and what types of assets do we have within those communities that we can toot our own horns about?
Sure. So first I'll say, from the Guyana perspective, one of the things that we are promoting now, of course, is this assignment by the IMF of the fastest growing economy in the world per capita. That's a big distinction. We're a small country. They've found, ExxonMobil specifically, 11 billion barrels of oil off the shore of Guyana. So we're the third largest oil producer in the world. And so that's brought a lot of interest and so forth to the country. So you could say natural resources would be a big draw, whether that's, sun and beach, or whether it's, agricultural goods that are really almost unavailable elsewhere except maybe Southeast Asia, right? That come from our agricultural activities. So I think natural resources is a big plus and a big plug, and we started to talk about this earlier, I think it's people. People in the Caribbean have a very, very, very high level of education. The statistics are, I think, our literacy rates sort of across the region are upwards of 92%, right? That's incredible when you're talking about workforce. So if we actually were able to harness that, now I know that it's being leveraged quite a bit for things like business process outsourcing and things like that, but there are other arenas, particularly around research coming from out of our universities and other types of very fundamental kind of education that make us an attractive region for work that involves, AI is great, but you still need people, right? And so if we could really tell that story better, I think, particularly now with the U.S. focusing on nearshoring, that would be pretty compelling, I think.
Great. So Ray, I want to talk to you a little bit about Bermuda, because we're a little unique in that we don't have the land. We can't. We're not producing or exporting anything. But I think Senator Jachet touched on it this morning in the main session when he spoke about the fact that it is a small community. And being a small community, you do have access to some people that you wouldn't necessarily have access to on a regular basis. So you may be in the grocery store with the premier. You may be in the grocery store with the Ministry of Economy and Labor, and you get to pitch your idea, et cetera, right on the spot. So can you talk a little bit about Bermuda and the opportunities that exist with regard to the fact that it is a smaller jurisdiction, and the types of things that we have done to create opportunities for entrepreneurs to kind of test out their ideas, if you will?
Well, I just want to first leverage on my panelists here. The best asset as the Caribbean that we have is the ability to work, eat, and play in such a wonderful environment. If you look at Europe or mainland America, snow, tornadoes. Yeah, we got a hurricane now and there, but for the most part, it's just beautiful to work in the places that we live in. So I think that's something that we undermine or we don't promote enough. Mm-hmm. Now, going to your question, the uniqueness of Bermuda, you couldn't have described it better, right? So in the Economic Development Department, someone reaches out. They want to see the premier. So within a matter of 2 or 3 emails, I can set up a meeting with the premier, the regulator, the minister, key stakeholders, and probably within 20 to 48 hours, we can have this meeting. Where else in the world can that actually happen? Mm-hmm. Could you imagine, people trying to coordinate with government figures, et cetera? It would probably take maybe a month to coordinate a meeting of that capacity. But that's one of the strengths of Bermuda, that as Jamila highlighted, we're so close to each other that we can quickly pull together people of that significance. I think the other part is we have a lot of talent in Bermuda, and our job is just to experience that talent to the wider world of what we can bring to the table. We have a reinsurance industry that's been around since the 70s, 80s, that's thriving. It's basically the best in the world. And once they come there, they realize how much talent already exists. So when they come, yes, they want to bring the C-suite individuals, but we all know C-suite ain't trying to roll their sleeves up and do the real grunt work. And then they find out the talent is right there on the island, and they're amazed. And then now they actually are reinvesting for the next generation of talent. And I think all that's capable, because we are a small and compact but friendly family environment. And so I think that's a major strength for us as Bermuda.
Yes, and I want to allow, can you elaborate on that, the people part and how that plays a part in why we have that competitive advantage?
Absolutely. So I would say that the two big things that we have as a Caribbean people is an innovative mindset and community. And we don't necessarily think of ourselves as innovative, but we are problem solvers. Trying to do, in fact, I would probably define innovation as figuring out how to do more with less. And that is where real innovation lies, and especially in the field of sustainability, where we are seeing dwindling resources, and where, besides Guyana, who's getting more and more natural resources,
Right.
the rest of us are finding that resources are dwindling, and so we need to be able to do more with less and be more efficient in our everyday use and everyday activities. And so I think we have that in our capacity, in our everyday life. I grew up, in a rural community where you had to do with what you had, and that was it. And so we have that innovative capacity. We have the community element, which I think is something that's very distinct and unique, that gives us that edge. And so we've heard a lot from the other panelists about how we can leverage that community. I have this really great example of this high school dropout in one of the small communities, a fishing village in St. Lucia. He had this guy was just a genius, like naturally. He dropped out of high school. He just couldn't deal with it because the truth is he required something different from what our education system gave him. And he decided one day, that village in particular had a lot of water issues. He decided to build his own desalination plant.
Well, there you go.
And
What?
And yeah, he reached out to his neighbors, and there were some spare parts. Somebody had this old caravan. Somebody had this. They all brought it together. This guy from YouTube videos built a mobile desalination plant, right? Yeah. And it gained the attention of on the national level, on the international level. Someone from Germany came in and said, "We want to buy your technology." And then we have to talk about that this other things that happen when we don't know what to do with what we have, right. And maintaining that ownership and the property and the patents and all those things. So we have these really great examples where people are trying to problem solve. Because there is a necessity, there's a need, there's an issue, and there's something that they're trying to provide to make their lives better and their community lives better. And I think we have that innately in us. And then, of course, just leveraging our community and the partnerships that we already have and depend on. And I think these are two things that are just critical for success in this space, and we have it.
So I would agree with you 110% that we do have it, but I would also like to point out that sometimes you have it, but if you don't have the support, like you said, you don't have access to the education, you don't have access to the networks to build on whatever it is that you've created, then in some instances that can be stifled. So I'm going to ask you, Osleen, what are you doing specifically to help to invest in these SMEs? How are you supporting them through the work that you're doing? And what can we use to model off of what you're doing in Guyana?
Right. I love this question because I'm going to answer in a not what people might expect way. So one of the things we have to do as part of our funding to do the work that we do is we must conduct research. So we have a senior fellow on staff, and he and I in particular, because we both teach and we're really interested in the why, right? So why is it with all of this incredible talent, a lot of the innovations that we support through our incubator, some of them started at the university, and others are just really bright people solving problems out in the world, and so in the world of Guyana, that is. And so over the last several years, our research has been looking at sort of all aspects of our program. when do people leave the program and why? Sort of attrition. For those that stay and they're funded, why do some succeed? Succeed in terms of revenue, because there are other ways to succeed, but succeed in terms of revenue, and why do others not? Is there a difference between men succeeding and women succeeding, or women not succeeding and men succeeding? And we actually have some answers for that. And so one of the things that's very disheartening that we discovered is that across the board, there is a general sense of a feeling of inadequacy amongst Caribbean people. And that feeling of inadequacy, and we've measured this, the feeling of inadequacy is coming from a combination of the legacy of colonialism, and I mean that in a very specific way. This is not philosophical. This is this idea that you're a worker, okay? That you're a worker. And if you're a worker, you're not an innovator. And if you're not an innovator and you're a worker, then the concept of I'm going to take this thing that I built, first of all, I can't believe that I built it, right? Because I'm not supposed to know how to do that. But I built this thing, so what do I do with it? How do I commercialize it? How do I start to make money on it? And then there's the second piece, which is faith. So faith and beliefs. So the belief that I am a worker and not an innovator. And then faith that says, I don't have to do much, God will provide. Yeah. Okay? So with God providing, I don't know that I need to hustle. I don't have to pick up the phone and dial for dollars, right? Because providence, right? And so and then the last bit that we found is, so it's beliefs, sort of what do I think about me and who am I? Faith, my belief in whatever version of God there is. It could be, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, it doesn't matter, right? Because we're a multicultural society in Guyana. And then thirdly is male versus female. So the women, we learned, don't have grit, right? The men in the society have grit. Now, Guyana, I'm sad to say, is quite misogynistic. And so the women are not encouraged to have grit, because if you stand up too tall, you get knocked back down, right? And so when the difficulties of entrepreneurship eventually and inevitably come, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm going to give up. Right. I'm right. And so those are the three reasons why we have seen some of the outcomes that we have, or less than desirable outcomes. So what are we doing about it? So and I had to say that first before I could say what are we doing about it, right? So what we do about it is we adapt our training and our coaching and our technical support and our capital to that, right? So for the women, I'll give you an example. For the women, we make it milestone driven. And we don't say it's milestone driven for women. We say it's milestone driven. So you have to achieve certain things. We're not writing you a check. We're not giving you all the money. You've got to get to these various points. And when you hit those markers, then you'll get the money, right? Because it makes it goal driven, and it gives us an opportunity to address those moments when they're going to, either because of faith or because of beliefs or because of lack of grit, give up. And so that's how we deal with it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Ray, so I want you to speak to Bermuda's, what you've seen. So Ray used to be a director at Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, where I currently work, and now he is fully within government from the Economic Development Department. So what you have seen in terms of entrepreneurship and the landscape, and some of the challenges that we face as people, and what has been done to try and overcome those challenges.
I'm going to be slightly controversial, differentiate from my panelists. As much as we are talented, as much as we are educated, but it's an education that was driven by either mainland Europe or mainland the U.S. So our creativity has been shrunken or made very narrow. If you look at a young one when they come into the world, they're very creative. I had a conversation with someone the other day. how many of you have seen a 2-year-old on an iPad
Right.
and actually use that iPad probably better than you and I? Because at that point, they haven't been poisoned by the traditional educational method yet. They're just being creative, they're just out there learning, they're solving problems for themselves. So that's a gift that we're all born with. But then when we get to a certain age, we're told to go primary school, high school, university, and all of that is narrowed down. So I think that's the first thing we need to tackle, not just in Bermuda, but I think just across the Caribbean, because I have a lot of friends in the Caribbean, and most of us did the same thing. Finished high school, got on a plane, went overseas to continue our education. To the point that I have an entrepreneurial spirit, because you just highlighted a few businesses that I run, but I don't really view myself as an everyday entrepreneur. And I think a lot of that has been based on my educational upbringing, you know. And is there any way you get to a certain stage and you start taking real control of who you are, all of that can come back to the forefront. And I think in a session this morning, Dante, you can relate when Gary said, reinvest. Like, basically, who are you? Reinvest, start again, et cetera, et cetera. Now, bringing it back to the question, I would say that the organization that you work for has been a major catalyst to address what I would say the shortcomings in the entrepreneurship ecosystem within Bermuda. The Bermuda Economic Development Corporation is awesome, very grassroots. I could relate to that as I was challenged to teach a class from scratch. So I wrote my own curriculum, and the executive director can attest. It was always oversubscribed because it's just the way how the class was being taught, so people were abrasive to the information. So just as an example of some of the things BEDC does. Then the next thing was like the ability to give small grants and different things like that. So all of a sudden people feel empowered to actually, hey, maybe I can take my idea to the next level. So there's some of the little things that we're doing in Bermuda, but like I say, they're little. We still need to do more. And I think to do more, we kind of need to leverage each other as a region. I think we're all probably got similar stories, fighting similar battles. And then when you look at it as individually, so us 60,000 people would say you're punching above your weight. But then if you look at across the Caribbean, that's millions of people.
16 million.
So that's a whole different conversation. So it's, how do we close that gap to take the local environment and make it regional? And I think that's how we can really change the landscape for entrepreneurship, not just in Bermuda, but across the whole region.
Okay, take my job. How can we close that gap? No, but seriously, I mean, I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you and with us, because I think that there is real opportunity there that we're not seizing that opportunity. There are many reasons why, right? We don't have time to go into all of them. But what I would like to talk to today is what can we do collectively? What are some of the things that we can do to support the entrepreneurs in our local ecosystem? And why can't we have unicorns in Bermuda, in St. Lucia, in Jamaica? Why can't we, right? And I think part of the reason is because, as Azleen has mentioned in our conversations over the past few days, is investors don't really look at entrepreneurs in those jurisdictions as investable companies. You see what I'm saying? And so what can we do to change that? And I'll start with it.
I'm going to stick to that thread of creativity. I
Yeah.
think that's the huge thing there. And it's that our educational system does not want to or foster creativity. We have a rote system of learning, it's based on colonial systems, and we continue to build on those. I don't know why, but the classes that I teach over at Arizona State, I mean, I have never seen anything like this. I studied at UE in Trinidad and Tobago, and I've done my whole schooling in St. Lucia, and we've never had classes where we engage with each other in groups, or we take risks or come up with ideas and allow them to fail and continue and persist. It's always been sort of this, just read, digest what you have, listen to the teacher, and what they say is gold. Don't object. And keep your head down and continue hustling, and that worker mentality, right, coming in. And it's interesting because one part of the research that I'm working on is actually tied very much to that, and it's that legacy of slavery as well, in particular islands where we have slavery, where the risk element is not something that's inherent with us because of that past, that legacy that has stayed with you of, if I take that risk, I might actually get killed. Right, so we see these inherent qualities persist with us throughout time. Where even today, where it's been hundreds of years since we've had slavery, but still we are afraid and we're fearful of taking those risks and being creative and failing and trying again. And I think that is where we have the biggest limitation. And this should start with the education system, like by far. And it's not because I'm in education, but really we all know in here that this is where it starts. When we start to tell our kids, no, you need to sit quietly, you can't interrupt, you can't disagree, you can't say that this isn't correct. The moment we start to do that, we're shutting down that mindset. We're immediately saying, no, you're not allowed to think differently. You're only allowed to agree with what was said by those who are in authority. And I really think that's where it starts. It's changing that pace.
Absolutely. Azaleen?
Yeah, I agree with that 150%. But in addition to the education system, which of course, we have, certainly I don't feel like I have any control over that. I think we can extend that, though. This is going to sound odd, but I actually think this is psychology. And so many of us are unwilling to seek help in this arena. We think that we're crazy if we get psychological assistance. But we've built into our program, we've sneakily built into our program a bit of support from psychologists. So we have people that come in during the course of the program for those who are going through it but haven't been awarded, and then those who have been awarded where they have sort of I'll call it a mental coach. So they start to challenge you and break down those negative beliefs that have come from, the past, or your family situation, or your financial situation, your partner who doesn't want you to succeed, or your family that's jealous, or whatever the case may be. So we embed in what we do some elements of psychology, both in the training, but also in the coaching and the technical support. We actually have a partnership with several different partnerships with different universities, one of which is NYU, which is my alma mater, and they provide coaching. So we bring MBAs in from the US, and it's really interesting to watch because the MBAs are obviously professional people. They're in a really high level. I think NYU's top 10 or whatever, and I only say that not because I'm bragging, but because the type of no. I'm saying the type of person. This wasn't the case when I went there. I went there a long time ago. But when the people come in now, they're lighting these folks on fire. They're just like, we had this one woman. I'm just going to tell a really quick anecdote. Her name was Sharon. Sharon is from China, and she was studying in the U.S. and she spoke English beautifully. But she was like very little, and so Sharon was a coach to some of our really high-performing folks, and she came in with all these, documents and papers, and found that wasn't working because she was directing our business owners in using, documents. One day, and I was observing, so I never really got involved. And one day I saw Sharon throw that piece of paper, and she started, and you don't you dare tell me you can't do this. You better be able to, and she just went off. but in the best possible way, like an auntie, like a family member who is just like, you don't you dare say you can't do this. And we leverage people like that throughout our program, again, from the MBA's coaching through the professional sort of psychologists on the back end for the people who've been awarded, because we know that this is a psychological game. It's really ultimately about what you believe that's going to enable you to achieve what you ought to achieve, not what you think you can achieve. Right. So that's how we deal with it, and that's very specific to us. But I can only manage that, you know. But it's very much a mind thing.
Yeah, I think even though you said it's specific to you, the problem persists, I think, across the Caribbean, because we've all had similar experiences, right? And so I think the idea of having that mindset coach or something to add that additional support, because once you get there or get to a point where you actually can get global investment or something like that, how do you receive that? How do you navigate that? And what happens? Like, this young man built this whole, desalination center, and someone's like, oh yeah, I want a piece of that. So how do you make sure that the entrepreneur is protected? So Ray, I'm gonna switch to you, and just how does the EDD, the Economic Development Department, support entrepreneurs in Bermuda and support them when they're interested in starting their own business? What kind of things exist?
Well, the main thing we do is partner with the BEDC by giving them an annual grant. And BEDC has great and wonderful programs. They do grants, loans, coaching, mentoring, training. So we predominantly support that organization. Our department also does small sponsorships for other people that may be not within the demographics of the BEDC. Like we do things in relation to for young entrepreneurs. There's people that has approached us at this event called the Disruptor Summit, which was for young kids. So that's just an idea of some of the other programs we support to promote entrepreneurship to young people. But I would say predominantly working closely alongside, I guess, the equivalent of our SBA, which is the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation.
See, I didn't need to be on the panel, right? Because he's plugging it for me. No, but we're small, right? You have the one organization that's doing all the things. Shirley Ann, I want to switch to you because we are talking a little bit about what makes us unique, from a Caribbean perspective. And you do have experience in sustainability, and we know that that is a big topic and a hot topic. So can you talk a little bit about how you leverage that uniqueness from a sustainability perspective?
Sure. So sustainability, as I'm going to define it, not because I think you don't know what it is, but just because we should be on the same page. So sustainability is not just about the environment, it's about society. It's about ensuring that we have enough for generations to come, right? So thinking 7 generations from now, will our grandchildren, great-grandchildren have enough as we do today? And so today, when we think about entrepreneurship and that interconnection with sustainability, it's merely a case of providing a good or service that is of value to the community and does not degrade the natural environment. So it's something that is profitable. It is something that returns value to the founder, to the entrepreneur, but also does a societal good. Right? And we see a lot of situations where people are, like I said before, are trying to solve those problems and coming up with innovative solutions that turn into ventures and enterprises. There is another example I'm going to bring. I have a lot of really cool examples I listed in my head that I was going to share with you guys, but this is my favorite example. And this is how I started working with businesses in St. Lucia. And this was after a hurricane. And this was a tiny village on the west coast of St. Lucia. Population is probably like 500. It's really, really small. Everyone knows everyone. And there was this major landslide that covered half of the village. And this small community, which was primarily agricultural, a lot of farmers in this area, all of a sudden started to realize that they didn't have enough food, or people were actually starving. I don't know about you guys in your countries, but in St. Lucia we have the saying that no one actually starves. There's no one starves. Everyone knows someone around that you will not go without food. And we actually saw people without food, and this was a shock, right? Because farms had been decimated, and people were actually without food. And so this group of women, four of them were over 65 years old, and they were all farmers or farmers' wives, decided to go around collecting whatever produce they had left or they could find. And someone had a dehydrator, and started to dehydrate these provisions, plantains, breadfruits, whatever, and created this cereal. And someone had some oats or something lying around, created this granola cereal. And they went around and started giving to people as a way of sustenance. Of course, the time passed, and people started asking for this granola because it was good. There were mangoes and like dried bananas and like the good stuff, right? And they started this little business thinking, hey, we're just making this tiny little granola. This thing blew up overnight, like nationally. The main supermarkets were asking to carry this product. And then all of a sudden, they're like, wait, what? We don't know anything about running a business. These are, farmers or farmers' wives, no education, not the first thing. But they started this with what? With a problem-solving mindset. That's right. They were just trying to do something for their society. And by the way, this was one of those companies that Whole Foods approached as well. we were talking about this earlier.
But they're not in Whole Foods.
They're not in Whole Foods. That's another conversation to be had. That's another conversation to be had. But the idea that we can provide a good or service to society, for the betterment of our society, that can lead to our own economic sustenance and activity, is what sustainable entrepreneurship is all about. And so when people think, well, I can't be a sustainable enterprise because it means I'm going to have to spend more money, or sustainability just costs more, or if I'm a small business, how can I actually think about sustainability? This is something that big companies do because they have the money and the time and the energy. Well, I would argue that that's not the case. I would argue that sustainability starts from the root and the value and the why. Why does this organization exist? What is your purpose? And if you are trying to solve a societal problem in particular, you have started from that point where you are going to generate those sustainability outcomes. So I think it's something that we all think about. We don't necessarily think of it as sustainability. So it's really moving away from the mindset of, I just need to come up with a venture just because I want to make money. It's more about, yes, I want to make money, but can I make money while also doing something good for society and for the environment?
Thank you for that. So, Azaleen, I want to ask you, how important is it for businesses that you see that are investable, for them to consider sustainability? How big of a deal is it for you to say yes to that business if they have a sustainability model built within their business model?
So I'm team sustainability the way that it's defined by my colleague, because I said in a discussion yesterday, and I don't mean to repeat myself at all, but I think the point is a really important one. There are 7 billion people on this planet, and if you think about those that, for our purposes, are either speaking English or understand English and so forth, and have the means to purchase, have some degree of purchasing power and so forth, are in this hemisphere so they can be gotten to in terms of product distribution and so forth. We're talking about maybe, 500,000 people, right? 500,000 people, and even the 7 billion people, do not need a don't need a chair that opens up because they can read your iris. Okay. What we need are solutions that take care of the fundamentals of life: food, water, shelter, education, and so forth. There are an immense number of solutions to those kind of problems that can and are being commercialized. So for me, sustainability is about, at least in our work, and it's why I think we're able to be funded, which is another conversation. It's actually like, how do we attract funding from those sources of capital that's solving problems, right? People are not going to look to our region for things that they can find solutions for in the US or Canada or the UK. That's duplicative, right? But what is it that we have, whether it's the really cool food, food product that doesn't currently exist in Whole Foods, right? Or we, for example, in our first awardee from our programs was somebody who had figured out how to make, in Guyana, activated carbon to clean water from coconut shell or coconut husk, right? So we are a massive producer of coconut, and for export purposes and for processing purposes. So, but what that does is creates tremendous amount of waste. And that waste is making its way into our waterways. So Guyana, the name Guyana in one of the Amerindian languages means land of many waters. So we have lots and lots and lots and lots of water. We're also in a tropical rainforest. But the water is becoming polluted because of our agricultural activity. The rice husk, coconut husk are destroying the environment. And so we have people in our program, I said we work on ag tech and ag science, we have people who've come up with ways to turn rice husk into building blocks, literally an alternative to concrete. The husk is an aggregate for the building blocks. That is in a commercialization phase. We have the person who, because of what we talked about earlier, wasn't ready for commercialization because of their own internal beliefs, decided not to move forward with the water filtration solution. But that's okay.
It's not okay.
Well, I have to say that it's okay because I would be really frustrated on a daily basis because I have a lot of these, right? I have a lot of these where people just go, I don't think I can do it. And then they're like, but you could be making several $100 million. And they're like, well, I just don't, that's not me. So to answer your question, I think for us, sustainability is about finding those products, those businesses, those solutions that are solving everyday problems, because that's what we have access to. That's what we can do. We don't need to make another Tesla. At least that's my opinion. So I think sustainability is sort of inherent in at least what we do.
Thank you for that. So Ray, I want to talk a little bit about Bermuda, because Bermuda is a little different in that we don't have the land capacity to do some of the things that other islands can. So we don't have a lot of coconuts in Bermuda, so we're not going to be doing that. But what we do have, I think, is, like you had alluded to earlier, is regulation and things like that. We have human capital. Can you talk a little bit about what Bermuda is trying to do to attract business or to encourage entrepreneurship development?
I just wanted to interject that we do have what I would call a sustainability asset that we were born into.
That's true.
And I think we take it for granted. And it comes to the collection of water. So the average Bermudian just grew up on our rivers catch water, be stored in a tank below. When you look around the world, a lot of people wish they had access to that. But to me, that's an opportunity for
a huge opportunity.
A small island like Bermuda to take that RIP and all of a sudden take it global. When you see some of the horror stories that happen in Africa around water and stuff like that, so taking that IP over there so that they can benefit from, and then maybe can monetize and make revenue from it. So we've been in this sustainability business for since inception.
Right.
But I think a lot of the things we do on the island are just taken for granted, and it's not viewed that way.
Because it was just a solution, right, to
So,
a problem.
exactly. So I just wanted to share that, as even though we don't have the coconuts and the rivers and all of that, we do have our own sustainability IP that we can leverage on, and that the people of Bermuda are currently using, but maybe we can share that globally. Repeat the question again.
See
I got
there?
sidetracked. Because I wanted to participate in the sustainability conversation.
Okay, so I was asking, because we don't have the land mass to do like these major exports and leverage that, what do we leverage in Bermuda in terms of like regulation and things like that?
Well, I think the ability to be flexible with our policy and legislation is a tremendous strength. We are trying to become an innovation hub, and by doing that, the regulator has created sandboxes for people from outside the jurisdiction to come in and test and work alongside, and then develop policy and legislation around the outcome of that innovation. And I think based on where the government is today, 30-6, it's really easy for the government, once they get a good idea, to push it through without much resistance. And I see that as an advantage.
Okay.
So when I'm in conversations with potential FDI, I actually promote that. The fact that the government is very agile and flexible and open to ideas to encourage innovation, but potentially will contribute to GDP within the jurisdiction. So I think that's a major strength of ours in Bermuda.
Thank you for that. Now, this clock is not moving, so I've been keeping an eye on my watch just to make sure that we don't go over time. Are there any questions from the audience? Because I have tons of questions, but I don't. Yes.
You, that was you.
Here.
Thank you. I know it's loud. I speak loud. Thank you, panel. I think it's been a fascinating discussion thus far. I wanted to ask this question about failure within the mindsets of people from the Caribbean, of Caribbean descent. Do you think within our various islands, our culture, is there a culture of acceptance of failure? I feel in Bermuda that's a limiting factor, because no one wants, you could fail in a bigger jurisdiction and no one really knows or cares, or it's embedded in the spirit of entrepreneurship. I feel that in Bermuda, failure is considered to be taboo, right? You just are not ever going to start something that isn't successful, and so we're not going to try to do it. And I think policies have been written to deter failure as a pathway towards success, because then that's just a lesson that you would have learned from. So I just wanted to, is there a cultural barrier with regard to accepting that could be a natural pathway within entrepreneurship?
So I have two thoughts about this very quickly. No, there is an acceptance of failure. I mean, this starts in elementary school. I mean, I think we've all would have experienced being hit by wrong answers to questions, which is insanity to me, but I think it still happens. So no. But on the other hand, in the context of what we do, I'm not sure that it applies, this idea that you can't fail. One, because we aren't, announcing that people are getting money and that they're, we don't put them on a stage or a pedestal from which to fall, potentially. So we tend to keep things quiet. I mean, people know what we do, but we don't promote individual people as having, oh my God, they're going to do the next big whatever, so that if they don't do it, not because of, in some cases, anything to do with them, but because the market doesn't want that thing right now. So I think if we don't overhype, there's no reason to overhype, right? Because this isn't it's not like we're what's Boiler Room was the movie a few years ago where, the guy's sitting at the phone trying to get people to buy stocks in companies that don't exist. So we're not doing that. And so I think if we just manage what we say about what we're doing, manage expectations, then people don't feel the embarrassment if they don't succeed. And then related to that, I think it's what is the milestone that they have to achieve and that we're telling them they have to achieve such that they might feel that they failed, right? So if you're just saying, again, you've got smaller milestones for people to get to in order to get access to capital or markets, then it's less likely that they'll be perceived as having failed if they don't get to the ultimate milestone. And what is the ultimate milestone? I think if that's clearly defined and there's some steps to get there, it doesn't feel as painful.
Really, really quickly, I would say yes, absolutely. The idea that one would undertake a venture and fail is completely taboo. I can imagine in my head someone going, "Did you hear?
Yes.
This person did this thing, and
Yeah.
oh my God, he spent all that money on that thing, and he just lost that money. He just wasted that money." I can totally hear that in my head, and that's what we do. We get hindered by this fear and embarrassment of, if we fail, everybody will know that we can't actually do this, and inherently we think we can't do this as well. So we have our inside voice and then the external societal voice saying we can't do this, and there is that fear that builds on itself that leads to the inability to even start. Right, and so we don't even get to that point of failure because we just don't want to take the risk. So I think absolutely it's a huge thing.
I just also want to add, and it's something that we face in Bermuda. So I take not hyping it up, keeping it quiet, but we have the other problem. Even if we keep it quiet, and let's say we fail, and your credit rating's been impacted. Unfortunately, the local bank knows, the local credit association is. So all of a sudden, when you try to reinvent and come back again, you can't, because they cross-check with everybody. Oh, they tried something and it failed. So I think we need to look at creating policies and legislation around giving people the ability to fail, so that one day they can succeed. Because right how things are set up now, it's forced to fail. So that's my contribution to it.
I think there was a question in the back. Oh, yes.
I have a question with context. Being born and raised in the Caribbean and then spending over a decade in Southeast Asia, where there are so many similarities, not only in weather and tropics and XYZ. We have this dialogue where we're all in the Caribbean basin, and how do we get together, work as a collective? And the context, or the preface to that question is in Southeast Asia, if you want to open a Chinese restaurant in a West Indian neighborhood, everybody figures out a way to pool that money together to open up the Chinese restaurant in the West Indian neighborhood. And there might be 10 of them in a laundromat. So the question to the panel is, what would be one concrete action from each person's perspective that would move, like an action that would get everyone collectively together to mobilize to say, hey, this is really all in our best interest to become a bloc, an economic bloc, the same way that Asia Pacific is an economic bloc without some of the drama.
What do you mean?
She called me, she said, how you this interloper?
My idea does not guarantee no drama. I'm sorry. But I think we have to go back to the fundamentals, and we have been engineered as a society to be separate and to doubt each other. Again, going back to, slavery and colonialism, the more divided people are, the easier they are to control. And I think we still haven't persisted beyond that point. And we still somehow are against each other and try to keep each other down. the weirdest thing, and I think it frustrates a lot of us in this room because we are aware of it and we felt it and we see it and we see this is why a lot of our communities keep themselves the way they are. But I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to showcase the examples that have worked. You just mentioned one great example, but there are many examples where people have actually bonded together, come together, pooled resources, and made something that benefits the group. And it ties in with this topic of failure as well, because again, if people are scared and they don't trust each other, then you have this disability to even start. But the moment you see that it's possible and you see people like you, right, who are creating these situations, then it starts to get at that psychological element, right? The deeper fear and of failure and not being able to trust each other. So I think that it's very fundamental, but I think it's something that really, really starts to shake a picture when we start to see role models, basically.
Anybody else want to answer? Okay. Yeah.
All right, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. So my name is Sean, and I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. So one of the things that I think I've noted, and I agree with you all, is that mindset is a major issue that we do have, and many people are fearful of failing. But I think there are some other issues that we also need to address in terms of how do we create an enabling environment for us to actually thrive as entrepreneurs. And I'm talking about from a regulatory standpoint, from an ease of doing business standpoint, because there's so many obstacles that entrepreneurs actually face when they're actually attempting to actually engage, whether it's actually raising finance, to actually incorporating the business, opening bank accounts, exporting products, etc. So how do we address that? That's one of my key questions. And then we have several islands, right? Maybe at least anywhere between 15 to say 21, depending on how you define CARICOM. Right? How do we create a harmonized regulatory system where you're not trying to address, like different legal systems to get your product across the region, to enhance interregional trade and intra-regional trade? So that's my question for you guys. It's a deep question for you.
So on the negative front, this is something that CARICOM has been trying to do for 60 years, 70, right? So we have we have the framework for this as a region. We can't get even to free movement of peoples, right? There are reasons why these things are difficult. I have some insight into it, but I don't, that's a course. It's a university course. I think that we have to, so here's the positive side. I am not a libertarian, but I probably am kind of close to one, in the sense that, for those who don't know what I mean, in the US, libertarians are people who don't want any government. And while I don't agree with that, somebody's got to build the roads and so forth. But I don't know that we have to rely on government completely for the things that you're talking about. There's no reason why entrepreneurial associations and organizations that exist just below the layer of government, we're enabling, because that's what we do. We're funded to do this. So whether we're funded by government or funded by private sector or some combination, there's nothing stopping us from working together to help elevate these businesses and help create pathways for them to be exporting or whatever. I think it's a coordination matter. This doesn't have to happen at the level of CARICOM. It doesn't have to happen at the level of individual country governments, because quite frankly, it's not going to, in my opinion. Some will and some won't at all because it doesn't serve them. So I think we have to think about this differently and say, how do we problem solve? And the problem solving is in looking to I'll call it the private sector of entrepreneurial support organizations. That's my opinion.
I would agree. Maybe Eureka. Oh, yes, she has another question.
Well, so good afternoon again. I am Karen Caraballo. I'm also from Trinidad and Tobago, and I work with an organization, a National Entrepreneurial Development Company, that we promote and support entrepreneurs. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have been doing a lot of programs to promote entrepreneurs, and we have seen in terms of specifically in terms of providing technical support being business advisory, coaching, training, mentorship, creating market spaces, as well as we do debt finances and grant funding, right? But at the same time, I'm listening to the panel here, and I'm actually so much impressed with the information I was sharing. And I particularly, what struck out with me was the thought as that the fear factor, the limitations of why we are not going as far as we need to, because we suffer from that in Trinidad. Because we do, sometimes I work with some of our entrepreneurs, and there's as far as they will go, and then there are a lot of programs that you are practically begging them to get in because they themselves are not doing the research to reach out to what is going. So there's a lot of spoon feeding, hand holding, and the challenges of that. But what I was thinking also when you were speaking is about in terms of inter-Caribbean, there's sometimes, like for instance in Trinidad right now, we have a shortage of coconut water. And I'm hearing you all have so many coconuts. And I'm saying, how come we don't know about that? So where is the information on what is going on in the Caribbean? Because I started talking to persons in this conference here, and I myself, there are things that I don't even know what is going on near the Caribbean islands. And we need to find a better way in how we communicate and we educate persons from early to primary school level. All right, I don't think that we are teaching our children what is going on in Borneo, what is going on in Montserrat. Can we define the countries? What is the resource? So when we start having that harmonizing feeling of that integration information, we build the Caribbean spirit, grow up, as opposed to when we wait on the later half when someone is now trying to develop. So there are things that we need to do. We need to be the force that creates that change, and get away from the fear factor. And I was like, we all live on an island, and then we ask ourselves how much of us can actually swim because we are afraid of the water that's around us. You know, so so we need to relook and rethink, reshape our mindset, and it has to start at an earlier age. You mentioned 16 million persons, and I'm saying we have entrepreneurs who are saying they don't know how to sell their product because they're thinking about the harsh trade agreements to reach the US and Europe. But then we have 16 million people that you can sell your product and service here. So there are these things that we need to start looking at.
Can I just say one thing about what you just said that struck me? There is no there is no trade barrier to the U.S. There's something called, and I'll just end here for me. This is the information asymmetry part. There is something called the Caribbean Basin Initiative in the U.S. It means that we can, in CARICOM, the 14 countries, export goods to the U.S. duty-free. Right? There's no reason for anybody to feel impeded by this. Of course, there's certain goods you can't send. You can't send meat and things like that. But in terms of what's possible, it's the lack of information. It's the lack of the belief that one can, and then there's the lack of grit, right?
Yes.
So if we can address that and come together, I think that there's no reason between the CARICOM agreement to ship between the 14 countries and send things to the US and Canada. We have agreements in every part of this hemisphere, with Latin America, with Canada, with the US, with EU. There's no excuse.
We have it, but what's one of the challenges we have, especially on our side, is that sometimes we have entrepreneurs who cannot, don't have the capacity to meet.
That's a different matter.
Yeah. So that's
the self part.
So that's what we have to work with them on. Okay.
And I was just going to say to the earlier question, I think that's the role that we play as in the ecosystem, right? We know that these are challenges that we have. We know that our entrepreneurs are struggling with these things. And so once we know, then it's inherent upon us to put in place solutions to those problems. So we have to put in place things to remove those barriers, to support those entrepreneurs where needed, to provide them with the mentor or with the coach to help build up their self-esteem so that they can move the way we know that they can. So that's the work, right? That's the work that we all signed up to do. And I think that here in this room, we all have this shared vision of what the Caribbean can be, what our entrepreneurs can achieve, and we know what talent we have there. And so it's up to us to make sure that everybody else knows that. And through investment, through government policies, through education, if we collaborate and work collectively, we can do it. We can do it. So my challenge to all of you is where you've identified a problem, you have met solutions or people who can bring those solutions to you. And so it's up to us to action it, right? It's up to us to say, okay, let's move whatever this is forward. How can we do that? Because we are going to be the solutions to our own problems. We have to be.
I just want to add, what we also could do better is celebrate our success stories.
Yes.
We learn better when we can visualize. So if it's one of us that all of a sudden is doing that international trade, and it happens to be your neighbor, all of a sudden I feel empowered. I could possibly do that. So we can do a better job of celebrating our success stories. I think that will go farther than the rest. Because like you said, a lot of this is available. But because they can't relate, because they don't see anybody that looks like them, that they just think it's impossible, when it actually is possible.
Charlene, you want to? Oh, you have another question. Sorry.
Actually, you guys all talked about commercialization in your own ways. I'm very curious to know, how are you defining it for your community and also collecting the data for like your stakeholders as well?
This is a great question. So we have had to define commercialization because that's what we're paid to do. We're funded to do. So commercialization for us is that you go from, most of our businesses are, for the incubator, they have got an MVP that they're actually deriving revenue from. So we don't take like, hey, I've got a really great idea, and there are plenty of government programs for that. So they go do that. For us, you have to have a proven concept. So there has to be research behind it if it's something that's coming out of the university or academia. If it's an invention of something that you've done on your own in your home, because we've got plenty of bright people that work on things at home, they're tinkerers. You have to demonstrate to us that this is a working prototype. And so for the incubator, it is that you have a product that we now simply need to find the customer to pay you for. So the work that you do with us is to ultimately get paying customers, and that's the point of our program. So by the end of whatever period, 18 months, 12 months, you've got signed contracts for income, and that's what we do. So one of our people who just finished the program, it's been about a year plus, he came back with some government contracts for his product. It's actually a software-based product, so it's a little bit easier. So he's managed to close 3 deals in the last 2 months. So that's commercialization for us, because he didn't have that before he came, but he had a proven concept and a minimum viable product that he could then go sell. On the accelerator front, these are people who are already in business, already generating revenue. So commercialization for us with those folks is that they have to land an international contract. They have to be exporting. And so those are our definitions.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Is this last?
Yes,
words?
this I think is the last one.
No, there's a, oh, okay, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Final words. We've talked about a lot today. As we know, we have the capabilities, we have the capacity, we actually have the mindset, but we also have a legacy of trauma, and that has led to the fear the fear of risks taken in particular. That seems to be the obstacle. It seems to be the biggest thing, and we've heard of entrepreneurs who don't think of themselves as entrepreneurs. We know of entrepreneurs that take the first step and they get to the fourth step and they're like, this is too much, I can't do it. And so that fear just somehow keeps lingering, and it seems to be the thing that is keeping us from being or reaching our full capabilities. And it really starts with, we think about the next generation education. It's that intervention. For us here today, thinking about dealing with that psychological trauma, right, that we spoke about. Also seeing others who have done it successfully that look like us. And there are really, really many examples out there of people who have persisted and have pushed those barriers and have made it. So seeing those, the success stories, celebrating those is another great way. And then throughout the process, so from the policy level and all the way down to the community level, where we start to support each other and recognize that we are all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to support our communities. We're trying to ensure that we all have a good standard of living, and we can do that and succeed at that together. So I really think there's a lot. There's nothing we're going to solve tomorrow. No. But we can start by really recognizing the issues that persist in our society.
And collaborating to fix them.
So my wrap up is going to be real short and sweet. There's a call to action for every level below government to come together, collaborate within the region so we could prosper. That's my closing remark.
And on that note, thank you so much for being here. I want to thank each of my panelists for sharing their thoughts. And thank you to GEN for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.